George Foreman has passed away at the age of 76. Foreman's family announcing the news via Foreman's Instagram account. George Foreman won a gold medal at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, turning pro the following year. And he won his first heavyweight championship in 1973 with a stunning second-round knockout of the previously unbeaten Joe Frazier. He lost that title to Muhammad Ali the very next year in the legendary Rumble in the Jungle. Foreman had a late career resurgence, losing in a unanimous decision to undefeated champion Evander Holyfield in 1991. However, Foreman became the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history at the age of 45 when he knocked out Michael Moorer in 1994. Foreman was also an entrepreneur who sold his likeness to a variety of products, including the George Foreman Grill. Foreman retired from boxing with a 76-5 record, with 68 of his wins coming via knockout. For more on the life and legacy of George Foreman, we welcome in CBS Sports boxing writer Brian Campbell. BC, incredibly sad news for the boxing world on a Friday night. George Foreman, when you hear the name, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think of that gregarious smile and, of course, that big right hand that took him to the heavyweight championship 2 times. You want to talk about one of the most well-known, well-beloved fighters in the history of boxing. You're talking about George Foreman. But his true legacy goes so much deeper than that. Literally a man with 2 careers, the first happening, of course, in the late 60s and 1970s when he was a bully inside the ring and really known for being a bully outside of it as well. Learned from former heavyweight champion Sonny Liston as a sparring partner, and as you mentioned, would go on to destroy Joe Frazier before taking part in maybe the most famous bout in the history of the sport, the Rumble in the Jungle. But at age 28, Foreman said goodbye to boxing literally out of nowhere after collapsing in the locker room following a loss to Jimmy Young. That would lead to a decade outside of the sport, ministry work in Texas, and a completely new life. And what happened along the way was George changed, like maybe his great rival Muhammad Ali, whose legacy is so many different layers to it, but would end as a beloved figure. So would Foreman, because of the way he battled back in the 1990s, age 45, showing up to fights with trays of cheeseburgers and, of course, a personality that would lead him to not only selling the George Foreman Grill to millions, but how about a sitcom on primetime television in the mid-1990s? Only a fighter with a smile and a heart as big George Foreman could have that type of dual legacy and end his career the way he did as a true hero.
Yeah, and to bring it back to boxing, maybe the heaviest hands the sport has ever seen. You got a chance to interview George Foreman in 2019. What do you remember about that interaction?
I just remember that, you know, there's that old saying, be careful, don't meet your heroes or what have you. I always say meet your heroes, because getting to sit down with George Foreman in Las Vegas at the Canelo Alvarez Danny Jacobs pay-per-view fight week and just pick his brain about his great career, him losing literally every second of the fight against Michael Moorer at age 45 in 1995, yet delivering the big punch when it mattered most. George had a heart of gold. He was known for his philanthropy work. He was also known for some quirks, right? He named all of his sons George, so there was never any doubt, unlike his own childhood, who was his natural father. This was a man that was beloved by so many because he connected in such a humble way in the second half of his career with so many. That's the George I met sitting down, the big gregarious laugh, retelling the great moments of his career. It's certainly a memory I will never forget, as well as watching him at age 45 do what we all thought was impossible, and that's regain that heavyweight championship.
Yeah, and that second act as a boxer came along, as you mentioned, with the second act as an entrepreneur. I don't know how many of us, but so many of us have had the George Foreman Grill on their counter in our kitchen or any other thing that had George Foreman's likeness on it. What does George Foreman leave as a legacy as far as being an entrepreneur goes as a boxer?
Well, I mean, look at the sales from the George Foreman Grill alone, and that obviously wasn't the only endorsement deal he would have, but it really speaks to the true character of who he was, especially during that 1990s comeback. He was gregarious, he was humble, he was relatable. I mentioned walking into press conferences with big plates of cheeseburgers and speaking to the public, saying, never give up, age is not a thing. That way, the way that he sold his fights and sold his personality would be the same way ultimately that he would get into the hearts of America and beyond and sell his famous grill and so many other products that he was linked to. You weren't buying a grill as much as you were buying Big George's smile, that sense of humor. But at the end of the day, you mentioned it earlier, Russ, outside of the personality, what he accomplished, known for maybe having the biggest single punch right hand in the history of the sport. Who could forget, yes, the big wins, the big losses, but how about the crazy brawl with Ernie Shavers, Ron Lyle? I mean, this guy has been in so many great ones. All the memories come flooding back in a sad moment like this. But 76 years on this earth and a legacy both inside and out the ring that you can't touch. Big George Foreman was larger than life. But like we said, you get a chance to meet him along the way, especially later on, you find out a real heart underneath that big right hand.
An incredibly sad night for the boxing world, but Brian Campbell, thank you so much for bringing a smile to our faces for some recollections about the great George Foreman. A two-time world heavyweight champion, minister and author, a father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. George Foreman was a champion in the ring and in life, and he has passed away at the age of 76.